Hello and welcome back to the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast. This is Penny Sansbury.
And Amy Cornell.
And we are on a mission this first month of the year. We're on a discoverability mission and a discoverability kick, as it were. Because unfortunately, the publishing industry is only going to get more competitive. And we have never done a dedicated show to website SEO, right? Amy, you're the one that kind of came up with this idea.
Yeah, I was surprised we haven't because, again, we have a lot to say, but at the end of the day, there are a limited number of topics that authors really need to stay focused on, but I was like, wow, I can't believe we haven't done one on website SEO because that is something you and I chat about all the time. And obviously we've been very candid with y'all that we pull a lot of our ideas from our everyday life, from what we do with the business, with our clients, things like that. So it's like, wow, I can't believe we haven't done this yet. So it's time. Plus it makes sense with all the other shows we've done this year already.
Yeah, exactly. It makes sense on the heels of several of the Amazon shows, the Amazon discoverability shows. So just as I feel like we're one of those disclaimers, like we are not lawyers. We are not website people.
Right. Please consult your doctor.
Right. So, I mean, if you want to find a website person, I mean, you're welcome to email us. We always have recommendations, but we don't design websites. We're actually not really SEO people. And here's the interesting thing. So Amy and I think it was last year or the year before, we were like, we have to find an SEO person. We have to find an SEO person. Mm-hmm. And this is not to disparage SEO people at all, because there's a lot of very knowledgeable people. But if you don't have the time to do the homework, then an SEO person, with an SEO expertise is definitely something that you may want to consider either now or down the road. But if you have the time to do the research, and that's something that we're going to unpack in this podcast rather, there's a lot that you can do on your own. So that's kind of where we're at with this, and why we thought that this was important, because there's a lot of deep dive stuff that you can do on your own. And we use a site, which I know we're going to recommend probably a billion times in this show, called Ubersuggest, which is Neil Patel runs this site. He's a super smart guy. I follow him on Instagram. I'm always screen grabbing some of the stuff some of the videos that he does, just to, with the data on it, just to come back to it, because he is just such a super smart guy. So we talk about, let's talk about kind of the best practices, and Amy and I are gonna plow through this list. And do you want to take the first one?
Sure. Yeah. So these are just going to be best practices and things to keep in mind. And Penny, I love that you mentioned that it's worth, yes, there are times when you might want to hire an SEO person and do some consulting, but it's also worth looking into some of this on your own, because you interviewed so many SEO people and we knew the questions we needed answers, and it was answered. And it's amazing how, when you have really specific goals, and for AME, we have a very specific industry that we work in, a very specific market, things like that. It was amazing how much didn't fit, in with the standard SEO recs. But then when we started doing our own research and kind of self-educating, we found ways to make it make sense for us. So for those of you listening, especially as an author, as a, air quotes, smaller business, sometimes doing the research yourself, you can find ways to make the best practices make more sense for you than the kind of broad general recommendations you're going to get from, somebody that you hire to give you like, oh, this is what you should be doing. So anyway, for what it's worth, first one, keywords matter, and they really should be everywhere. Keywords on your website, using the right keywords, and they need to be strategically placed on your website. We'll dig into this more, but just know that if your website isn't being optimized for the kind of keywords you want to be found for, very similar to Amazon. If y'all have been listening, you hear us talk about this a lot, but on the Amazon side. But if you're not doing it for your website, then your website is not going to be showing up in searches. So just keep that in mind. Keywords are king.
The other piece of it, though, too, is that high quality content really matters. So everything on your website should have a purpose and serve a need, right? And everything on your website should also be directed to your reader, to your customer. Now, this is interesting, and this is where SEO people that I interviewed, at least, and I had a huge disconnect. Because one of the things that they will do for you is that they will write content. Because they all know that high quality content matters. The problem with that we had in particular, and this is very unique to our industry, is that the content that they were suggesting that we write or that they write was too far out in the author journey for it to be really relevant to us. And by that, I mean, they were talking about write a blog post on how to get published.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We know, and maybe some of you listening have experienced this as well, the author journey can be long and involved. And sometimes we have had authors, like even on our newsletter list, that have been sitting there for 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
So the other piece of the high quality content is you got to really understand where you are meeting the reader, right? And yeah, I could write about how to get published all day long. I've taught how to get published at NYU, and at writers' conferences, but that's not really where we want to bring people in, because those folks, for us, our content is designed to bring in clients who are willing and ready to spend money. And that's not where, if somebody is just getting, thinking about getting published, they could be tire kicking for years. So that's something to really, that is something to really understand too, is where the content that you're creating, it has to matter to your end user.
Yes, absolutely. And along with that, usability and navigation. I know that sounds like a no-brainer, but it's surprising how you can get too close to your own work with your website as well, because you go on there and you're like, no, it has everything I want. It's great. But your website should be easy to navigate. Things shouldn't be hidden. You know what I mean? It's not a treasure hunt. Don't expect people to spend that long on your site necessarily until they get to know you better and until they're already a fan. So you want to use clear labeling, tabs. You want to pay attention to scrolling. Again, this is not something that we specialize in. This is something that you would hire a website person to help you refine, but it is important. The experience is also really important. So the content that you put on there should have a purpose and serve a need, but then how they use your site and where they can easily find things, how to contact you, bonus materials, all those kind of things should be easy to find and naturally, placed on your site for the user experience, not just it's good enough, it's there somewhere. They'll find it if they click around. That is the worst thing you could think, because you can't guarantee people will spend a lot of time clicking around. Like, that is something I think, Penny, people would be surprised how little time people actually end up spending on websites, even for brands that they like.
Well, and here's the thing though, too, is this is not something that I have just cooked up in my head. There are enough studies out there that show, I used to teach actually website and SEO classes years ago, when SEO was a lot simpler than it is today. And one of the things that I used to tell authors who were getting their websites developed is you got to shorten the staircase. What that means is that every single time that you ask a consumer to click, you lose 20% of those consumers, right? Mm-hmm. Every click is 20%. So you do the math on that, right? That's part of the reason why when authors say, oh, I want to do Facebook ads, I remind them that, okay, fine, you can do Facebook ads and good luck with that. But every time that you make somebody click off of Facebook, which is really hard to do because Facebook is designed to keep you on their platform, you lose 20%. And I would imagine that number is probably higher when it comes to trying to get somebody off of social media, and keep them off of social media. The other thing is is So, and this is another thing that Neil Patel has said in a lot of his Instagram posts and his blog posts. So imagery is really important. They break up content. Our minds are not word processors. We are image processors. So images on your website help the mind to digest your content, right? Obviously, they help to enhance the user experience, et cetera. Make sure to name those images using keywords. We're going to get into keywords in a minute. The other thing that is on the rise, well, it's not really on the rise, it's been on the rise for a while, thanks to TikTok, is video content. And by the way, I want to just make a mention, since I mentioned TikTok, not to move off of this conversation entirely. Part of the reason why this website conversation is so important is that you really want to have a home base for your reader. Okay. You want to have a place to bring your reader to capture them, to keep them, to get their email address, etc. A lot of authors use social media platforms, and they'll, like, because I talked to an author, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks ago or something, and I asked this person, I said, so give me your website address. And they said www.linkedin.com/, and I thought, wait a minute, buddy, I mean, if you're on LinkedIn and you're doing great, don't. I'm not telling you to get off of there. Your website is crucially important. And we saw that, of course, we record these episodes a week or two before they actually launch, but we saw that recently with TikTok going offline and everybody and their mother like losing their mind, except for Amy, I think, and myself. We were probably the only ones. But when you are putting all of your effort into a social media platform, you are essentially crop sharing, the old version of crop sharing, right? So you are trusting that you aren't going to accidentally violate the terms of service and get your account pulled, or B, that place is going to be around forever and ever. So just back to the conversation now. It's just my 2 cents about social media. You really have to, I mean, we are creating a lot more video this year because video and images are something that really help to spike and grow user content. But you got to make your website your home base, make it your home base and treat it like your home base and invest your time at growing your website. Okay. That's my spiel on social. I have such a love-hate relationship with social media, but
I know. I think we all do. I think it's healthy. If you don't, then,
those are the people that were like, crying in the street and tearing out their hair when TikTok went down. But anyway.
Right, exactly. And this next one is key. This is a big one that I think doesn't get the attention it deserves because it really is a next level element of SEO, but it's for when people start getting really serious about where they're showing up in Google and showing up in search results and things like that. Because I think a lot of times it's just done for you by whoever makes your website. But oftentimes the person that makes your website isn't an expert in what you do, isn't an expert in your message, is not an expert in your buyer market, your reader market, things like that. So the last kind of overall tip that we want to cover is optimizing every page of your website on the back end. And what this means is having very strategic SEO titles and meta descriptions. And you're probably thinking, Amy, you're speaking another language now. I'm losing interest. But honestly, this is very simple. What these are is, any of you that have done a Google search, all the results there, you'll typically see a title of the search result, and then you'll see a brief description of the content, the page, the answer, whatever you're looking for. So that is what I'm talking about when it comes to SEO titles and meta descriptions. What you see in a Google search result, that big title is your SEO title, and that kind of little description of what you plan to, that you'll see on that page if you click through, is your meta description. And those are applicable to every single page that you have on your website. And you really want to make sure you're maximizing on those because those are really key, not only in helping you show up and search for the right keywords, but it also is oftentimes going to be the first impression someone has before they click through to your website. So are you saying the right things? Are you interesting? Are you intriguing? Are you giving them a heads up on that you're going to give them something they're looking for or might be interested in? So these really need to be clear, exciting, click-worthy. I mean, we say this internally in the best way possible. Clickbait, the kind of things you can't help but click on it because you want to know what's on the next page. Or it's like, no, that's so perfect for what I'm looking for. That's what you want to go for, but you have to make that happen on the back end of your website. So whoever made your website, you can tell them, I want to make sure that my SEO titles and meta descriptions are optimized. And they'll probably go, whoa. Like, what have you been listening to or what did you read? And you can work with them on that. And if you're unsure, this is something like we'd encourage you to reach out. It might be something that we can help you with just because if you're in the publishing industry, we have a lot of insight in these buyer markets, reader markets, things like that. So this might be something that we can consult with you on as well if you're feeling a little lost. But it's definitely worth doing and it will make or break whether or not your site is showing up.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what got us down this this trajectory of, we do monthly SEO calls and I love them. They're really fun. We do brainstorming, which of course I love. We talk about blog post content, but Amy has really she's really been wrestled our SEO stuff and our website into submission, because years ago, this goes back a while now. I ran Google Ads for a while because a lot of times, authors will be like, "Can I just run Google Ads for visibility?" It's like, well, sure. Do you have a $10,000 ad budget? I mean, Google Ads are really expensive, and I ran them for a while, and I was just like, I can't, we just can't keep doing this. And then at some point, we discovered that the website, like when you looked at the term book marketing or book marketing agencies or something, like the website was on page 4 of Google. And I'm telling you right now, if you want to bury a dead body, bury it on page 4 of Google, because nobody looks there, right? It's a little bit of a true crime element in this podcast, people.
That's funny.
Thank you so much. So that is what sent us down this rabbit hole of keywords and trying to figure out. And I'll tell you one thing though, too. If you're listening to this and you're like, oh, this is so complicated, like, I get it. But if you spend a little bit of time with this, we resurrected the website. I mean, it took 3 months, which was the longest 3 months of my life, let me tell you, because I was like, I want my website to come up. But it took about 3 months. And then the website gradually started to move up the Google chain. And once it got, websites still fluctuate because Google changes their algorithms. They do all this mysterious stuff on the back end. But one of the things because we're going to get into the keyword conversation next, one of the things that is really important for you to remember from all of the stuff that we're talking about today, there is no way to trick Google. You can't trick Google. 10 years ago, you could trick Google all day long. And there were companies that were set up to do just that. You cannot trick Google. Google is looking to the user experience. All they care about is the people that are searching. And that is the only thing that you should care about. So, if you're keywords are always so mystifying to people. And I cannot tell you how many times I've had a conversation with Amy and I'm like, can't we just put book marketing on every page and would just be great? And then we can go have margaritas, and she'll tell you in a minute why that's a super bad idea. But if you're serious about taking your website up to the next level, use a platform that we mentioned already a couple times, Ubersuggest. And I'm going to tell you what, there's a lot of really good, like if Ubersuggest, if you look at it and it's not really your jam, fine. There are a lot of other like SEO Moz, and I will tell you that flat out, we've tried all of them. They pretty much all do the same thing. So find something that you feel is your jam and your vibe. But Ubersuggest is very simple. I mean, Amy self-taught. She taught herself how to use it, how to, extract the information. And Amy, it also does. I mean, one of the things that you and I really, I love the metrics for competitors because I'm always checking out, checking out the competition, and giving Amy a list of, can we do all these things on our website, which makes her want to beat her head against the desk. But anyway.
But no, it's true. I definitely recommend Ubersuggest. And I will say that for those of you listening, I don't consider myself a techie person. And I'm actually not really a data-driven person either. I mean, I know, I understand and appreciate the importance of it, but I don't get excited about it. So I will say I went with Ubersuggest because I found it to be easy to use without an overwhelming amount of data just thrown in your face to the extent that you don't know where to start, if that makes sense. I will say Ubersuggest is really the way they've laid it out. Neil Patel's done a great job of keeping things compartmentalized. You know what I mean? So you can kind of work on different elements at a time versus you log in and it's like, here's 50 pages of data you can download. I'm like, oh gosh, no,
Yeah.
But yes, this is really great. So finding and using keywords. So as Penny said, competitors. So this is a really great way to start figuring out keywords because on Ubersuggest and pretty much every other SEO platform out there, you can enter in the URL of a competitor. So for most of you listening, this would be another author within your genre topic, somewhat at your level, a little bit above you, because obviously you want to be looking at somebody that has seen some success already, that's on a good trajectory. but you can use them, and these systems can tell you what their sites, what kind of keywords are ranking for them, and what kind of keywords are sending traffic to their website. It's a really great way to figure out what people in your reader and buyer market are out there looking for and how they end up landing on other author sites. So that is huge in terms of where do I start? Starting with a good competitive research of what's working for other people. Similarly, Penny, we talk about this on a lot of other shows for a lot of different reasons. Do some competitive research on what's working for other authors, and SEO is one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then so SEO platforms do make keyword recommendations. But I recommend that you start with a basic list of keywords. The reason that I know that I sound a little hesitant in that we had this experience where we knew, and this wasn't a knowledge that we were necessarily, SEO born with. So when we started this process, we weren't really clear on that. But we became clear as we started to use this keyword. So as you start to play with keywords, the same might be true for you. Many of the keyword recommendations, or some of the keyword recommendations, I should say, that the SEO platforms gave us were how to get published, getting published, right? And so those were immediately scrapped off the list. I really recommend to start with a short list of basic keywords that really apply to your book, your work, and this is for fiction or nonfiction. So if you've written fiction, what are the keywords that you use, for example, for Amazon? That's a really, really good place to start. Now, the Amazon keywords aren't necessarily, this is not me making a blanket statement that, oh, just use your Amazon keywords for your SEO, because they may resonate differently on Google, but it's definitely a good place to start, especially, like I said, for fiction where it becomes a little bit more challenging. So a site like Ubersuggest will give you recommendations based on the number of searches being done for keywords each month. So more searches means more traffic. But as we have seen with our own keywords, you don't always need thousands of searches to make it worth your while, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because some of our keywords only get a couple of hundred searches a month, but we know that they're driving quality traffic to our site, meaning authors who are serious about finding a book marketing firm. And we actually discovered this, I think, in December, in our December SEO call, where we stumbled on, we're always stumbling on new things, which is kind of cool. But where we stumbled on a string or several keyword strings that we would never even really thought of. And we're like, oh my gosh. And then we use them. And then by January, they were already coming up page 1 in search. So sometimes it's really that easy. So yeah. And Amy, the next point that Amy's going to talk about, man, she and I battled over this.
Yes. And I love your point, Penny, about starting small, like start with what you know. So do the competitive research, start with keywords that you know make sense for your book, your reader market. I mean, we've done a ton of shows on kind of knowing who your reader market is. So you should have an idea. And I agree, Penny, you can use a site like Ubersuggest to test your Amazon keywords as well. And a site like Ubersuggest can tell you how many people are using those keywords on Google. But what's nice about starting simple is that you can plug simple keywords into a program like Ubersuggest, and they will give you similar keywords back that are actually, and then you can see how those are being used. So like, for example, book marketing for us, that gets tens of thousands of searches a month for all sorts of different reasons. And not all those reasons are relevant to us. But when we do that and get suggestions from Ubersuggest, we start getting much more specific keywords that include, like phrases that include book marketing. So best book marketing firms to hire, things like that. We're like, bam, that's the kind of really specific keywords that we want to focus on. So same thing for y'all listening. Start general, and you can use a program to give you something more specific that's going to give you a lot better return than doing something super general, like Penny said, that may get a ton of traffic, but the chances of them landing on your site aren't as high if it's something super general. So once you get these keywords, like Penny said, aim for any, I mean, this is a really just this number, it's a goal, so don't stress. Aim for anywhere from like a dozen to 2 dozen. And depending on how big your site is, how much you have to say, how long you've been around, I'm using quotes, that could change. But you want to start using these keywords on your website, but you want to use them organically. You want to make them sound natural. You don't just want to shove them in there. You definitely don't want to repeat the same keyword over and over again. And Penny, you mentioned this on a recent episode that we did. Read your own website content out loud.
Oh my gosh, yes.
To see how natural it sounds. That's one of the best ways to know whether it sounds natural, or better yet, have somebody read it, have somebody read your own website content to you, because then you might sit there and cringe at a few things and go, okay, definitely need to change that. And and then Penny, you should definitely take the next one, because I know you have a lot to say about this, but yeah, you definitely want to use all your keywords naturally on all the pages of your website, because essentially what that does is it reiterates with Google that that's what your site is about.
Yeah.
The more you use your keywords all over your website on all the pages, that's telling Google, oh, look, this is what this site is about. So somebody searching for this is likely going to find this site useful, interesting, relevant, all the things.
Right, exactly. And this is where, I mean, Amy is the keyword police on our website, because this is really where I'm just like, can we just put book marketing everywhere? Like, no, Penny, we cannot put book marketing everywhere. And it is challenging sometimes to figure out how to word your content so that it sounds natural and that it still incorporates the keywords. ChatGPT is a great tool to help revamp existing content with your listed keywords. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll say, okay, we really have to reword this so that it sounds really natural, but at the same time uses these keywords. And I want to just kind of reiterate here, when we say keywords, we're always talking about keyword strings, right? Because Google did a study a number of years ago and found that the more keywords that a consumer types into Google, the closer they are to a buy. So it rarely do we ever see a singular keyword that generates that Uber suggests, recommends, right? Amy, I mean, am I missing something? But
no, I mean, I would say, yeah, to your point, rarely is it a single keyword or even just 2 words. Usually you don't start getting those high quality, we're talking quality over quantity, excuse me, when you get multiple words, like a whole phrase, like I mentioned earlier, not book marketing, best book marketing firms to hire. The second version of that is so much more specific, and somebody searching for that is going to be a lot more interested in potentially talking with us than just the random person putting in book marketing, because maybe that person's just looking to market their own stuff, which is fine. But you know what I mean? 2 totally different searches, 2 totally different intentions.
2 totally different intentions. And this is really where we have to have like a moment with the keywords that we were using, because you do get a lot of people, which again, as Amy said, is fine, who want to DIY their own book marketing. Great. They want to get ideas. Fine. That's why we have the blog. That's why we do the podcast. Like, we get it. But those aren't people who are going to hire us. So making sure that you are crystal clear, and this isn't something that you're going to come to overnight, because we certainly didn't. And we've been in business for 24 years. But using, once you figure out what those keyword strings are, pop in your content or pop in what you want to say if you don't have any existing content with the keyword string into ChatGPT and see what it spits out, see what it recommends, because that's really going to help to inspire and potentially inform how your what the words on your website are going to look like. The next piece of it, and this is really where we struggled with this for years, is blog SEO. So we've had the blog for years. So we used to, this feels so mind-numbing to me now. I used to write, and then Amy took over writing some of these, like a piece of fresh content every single week, because we thought that was really going to help to drive traffic to the site. What we learned in the 12, 13 plus years working together is that the author coming to the blog is typically the do-it-yourself author, which again, is totally fine. So we have the blog, so we have the podcast. And we struggled also with the type of content to write because how many different things can you say about book marketing, right? I mean, we struggle with that on sometimes on the podcast. It's like, okay, have we said this already? Have we talked about this? Because we feel like we realize that there is benefit in repetition in terms of the more times you hear it, the more it kind of sinks in. We get it. But the blog helps us to drive traffic to the site. But we understand now that the demographic of that reader, of that blog reader, is probably not going to hire us, which again is fine. So we pulled down on the amount of content that we were writing and instead beefed up the quality of content, right? Not that we were necessarily writing, crap content before when we were doing it once a week, but we beefed up the level and the extent of the content that we were writing. And then we dropped it down to two pieces of content a month. It's very challenging, especially if you're a fiction author. Like, what are you going to write about? What are you going to write about? Remember that your reader probably aspires at some level to become an author. And I'm not suggesting that you walk them through the process of how to get published, but use your blog to invite them into your world, right? Use your blog to, you know, talk about your process. If you've written historical fiction, talk about what it's like to do research and things like that. But the blog, I mean, Amy, the blog is a great way to infuse your website with keywords. But you have to, as we did, especially if you're a nonfiction author, you really have to understand the journey of your end user as you're starting to put content together.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the blog, and that's another point worth making that Penny and I learned the hard way. And so we're sharing that with you. Another tricky part of figuring out SEO and figuring out how to show up better in a Google search for your author website and things like that is that a lot of times SEO recommendations are much more, they lean more toward your website as the website, not necessarily as the blog. And so we had a really hard time trying to figure out the best SEO practices for blog posts specifically, because so much of what you read out there is for your website. And it's not one for one. Not all of it makes sense for when you're talking about blog optimization. So that was another reason why we wanted to dig into this section too, for those of you that, have a blog, think you should have a blog, gave up on your blog, all the things, because like Penny said, it really is an excellent way to beef up your website and make your website more relevant. But we fully understand, as Penny said, the challenges with coming up with content and staying relevant. But one thing you have to do, save yourself the time and energy. Don't just put up blog posts to put up blog posts, because those will do nothing for you. Similar to your website pages, your blog posts also need to be optimized. Just like I talked about, SEO, title, metadata, you need to use a keyword that makes sense. Long tail keywords, like we talked about, those longer phrases are great. And what we've learned too, and what Google has gotten better at, because Google is getting smarter, Google is more about the user experience. You don't always have to use that keyword verbatim. You really have to, Google's gotten smart enough to realize the topic. It knows how to recognize a topic based on the content. So yes, you have a keyword that you have to tie to your piece, but as long as you stick to that topic and what that keyword is about, you can still rank really well for it. That is something that we struggle with for so long, Penny, right? Trying to cram in a very specific keyword over and over again and make it sound natural. Like,
oh my gosh.
I was ready to throw my computer out the window many times because of that. So what's so great about, like I say, the new Google, but how much smarter Google is getting, is that if you were, like Penny said, writing high quality content, quality over quantity, and you're sticking to the topic that you claim that is the keyword for that piece, you'll still rank really, really well without having to do that really unnatural keyword plugin where it's like, okay, I've written 20 words. Now I need to put the keyword in again. Like, don't worry about that anymore. Just stay true to the concept behind the topic and you'll be fine. But you don't want to waste your time writing blog content if it doesn't have a purpose. And even if that purpose is super fun, even if it's you're writing blog posts to do character profiles for your fiction novel. That's totally fine because that's a great way to use genre appropriate keywords.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be super intense, and you don't always have to be super serious. You can do really fun stuff too, but make sure it has a purpose for who the intended reader is. Give it a keyword. Make sure you do your back end optimization make sure it has an SEO title and metadata, and that content will start working for you.
And what's interesting is that if you look through, and I'm just going to really open the kimono here, because if you look through really old blog posts, Amy's killed off a lot of them just because we were horrified. Kind of like looking back. I mean, sometimes I feel like our blog is looking back at old prom photos, and you're like, oh, right? And you're like, first off, why did I go to the prom with that loser? And secondly, like, what was wrong? I mean, prom for me would have been in the 80s. So what the hell was going on with my hair? But when we look through old blog posts, sometimes I'm kind of horrified because we were subscribing to really old ideas about how to use keywords, which is basically just shove that keyword in every blog post orifice that you can and just hope for the best. And
hope they don't realize how awkward that was and they'll look beyond
it was so awkward. Like some of these posts where I'm just like, oh, and we'll go back through and we'll refresh content, and I'll send Amy a text and be like, I don't really like 2012 Penny. Like, she was stupid. We don't
Yes.
Oh my gosh. So please don't look through some of our really old content. Or if you do, email us and let us know, and we'll send you a prize if it's really if the blog post is really awful and needs to be burned to the ground. All right. And you can use, I think the final tip with this whole blog piece of it is you can use the keywords that you researched for your website, use them on posts. I mean, that's what we do. So we have a whole list of keywords and we track them every month and we add new ones. And then we use those for our blog posts, right? Our blog post titles, and sometimes depending on as quote unquote, as appropriate for our podcast titles and stuff like that. But I will say that when it comes to a blog, more is not better. Sometimes it's just more. And writing a post a week, literally that's all I had time for, basically. It didn't make one iota bit of difference. So even if you're listening to this and you're like, I know I need a blog, I'd like to have a blog, write one post a month. I mean, technically, this is totally on me. We could be probably going down to one really good piece of content a month and be totally fine with putting up our podcast every week and stuff like that. But I am not willing to let go of that SEO life preserver that I've had. At some point, we probably will. Google really, as Amy pointed out, Google has just gotten so smart about people who are on, who are creating websites and creating really good content, because the only thing that they care about, as we've said, is the user experience. And that's the only thing that you should care about too.
Absolutely.
Did we miss anything? I know this has been a really long show, and I appreciate you all so much for hanging in there with us. But it is important, and we hope that we'd love your feedback, by the way, on the show. Make sure to subscribe to our shows. That way you get notified every time that it gets, a new one pops into your feed. If you have an author friend, which hopefully you do, share the show with somebody that you think could really benefit from not just this particular episode, but all of the ones we've done in the 4 years that we've been doing this show. We also love reviews and show ideas. Our email is in the show notes. Email us. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.